Hello, thank you for joining me at the table for NATO Air Commander, Solitaire Strategic Air Command in World War III, which, according to the rulebook, this is based on 1987 situations and scenarios. This is another Hollandspiel game, and I'm very excited to try this one. I did not, in my usual fashion, I have not played this yet. So you're going to experience it along with me. I did read it, and here's what's really funny. I created these note cards because I'm sick of doing videos with you guys and then saying, hey, I remember this rule, but I just can't remember where it is, and then I'm flipping through the rule book. So I made note cards for the entire rule book, and I was all proud of myself. I was going to impress some of you that I actually look like I care about my channel versus just flying by the seat of my pants all the time, which I do, by the way. But then I get to the end of the rule book, and they have this player aid that says almost everything that's on my note cards. So we'll be able to compare them side by side and see how we did. And the thing is a good player aid, of course, in my opinion, you should never have to flip back to the rule book if the player aid's good enough. So we're going to put it to the test. Okay, so component overview and setup. We will go over that real quick, and then gameplay will start on video 2, if you would like to just jump to that. I like seeing things in a sequence. When I play the DVG games, they always have somewhere on the board, step 1, step 2, step 3. I'm really not a sequence person in real life. I jump to the conclusion all the time, but in board games, I like the sequence reminders. And so I wrote my note cards to do a similar pattern. And what's funny is this player aid does seem to do it, which I'm impressed with. And there's spots in the rule book where it explains, like, for example, you can set a mission for close air support, but then it doesn't tell you what close air support does until like a couple pages later. And so that frustrated me, and I got out my note card because I was like, you know what? I need to write down what close air support is from the 2 pages later, so that way when I'm on my primary missions step, I can know what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. And this player aid actually does do that for you. Right here under the primary missions, it has a nice summary of what those missions are doing for you. And see here where it says each hit adds blah, blah, blah. That's the part that was missing. It's in 2 separate sections in the rule book. The primary mission section of the rule book has close air support, and that's one of the things you can do. And then later on, it tells you what the hits actually do. So it's like, okay, great. I'm more than happy to assign my planes to a ground air support. But then later on, it tells you exactly what you're getting for it. So right here in the air planning phase is what I'm referring to. It tells you what all your missions are, but it doesn't tell you what they do. But as you can see, this is a wonderful player aid. It tells you exactly what every mission does. You just have to look. Like when you're at this phase, you have to jump down to here, but that's no big deal. No big deal at all. So I made the cards to try to do a similar thing. So let's dive in. As far as components and stuff go, I'm very impressed with Hollandspiel. The components, again, are still good. The rulebook, I thought, was pretty easy to follow. My only criticism of it is it had 0 examples. And I mean 0 examples of how to play. No automated, no like first turn, nothing. Now, with that being said, I do believe I understood everything, but I had to read it a little bit slower. That was the first piece. The writing these cards actually helped me immensely because this is how I would work in college. I would actually write my notes, and if I write what I'm hearing, I usually have photographic memory and can remember it forever. And it's funny because after writing all this, I actually memorize things a lot better than if I would have just read the rule book and not wrote anything down. The process of writing helps me to memorize things. I'm not saying I have a photographic memory in this, but I actually feel pretty good about this one. Okay, so with that said, how do we set up? How do we play? The game has, as you can see, a bunch of different components. The primary pieces, of course, are your planes. I am set up for what's called Scenario 1. And Scenario 1 uses every plane except for two. These two right here. So we'll go into that in a second, but it's all in the back of the rulebook. There are 3 scenarios that you can play in this game, and the rulebook says that they are progressively harder, meaning that the first scenario is the easiest, and then the other 2 are a bigger challenge. There's some flavor text if you want to read that sometime. I'm not going to. The starting forces, it tells you right here what the planes are, and it says to put them in the basing box. I'll explain that in a second. Then there's a turn 1 reinforcements and a turn 2 reinforcement. And what I did was I just put them in these 2 respective boxes there. So we're going to get more planes as the missions go on. Okay, so it is a 10-turn game. So if I'm getting reinforcements on turn 1 and turn 2, I will be using all the planes for quite a bit. Okay, so what do the planes do? What are they? They all have 3 stats. The first one is their air-to-air value. The middle one is their ground combat. The right one is their strike value, or their ability to do precision bombing or strikes. The colors, they do mean something. That just tells you which country they are, and I can read it to you. Blue is the United States. Gold is Germany. Tan is the United Kingdom. Orange is the Netherlands. And then yellow, and you can see that's the difference between gold and yellow. It's noticeable, but obviously at first blush you might think these are the yellow ones. Yellow is Belgium, and they have one and only one plane in the game, so you don't have to worry about confusing yellow too much. There's just one. And red is Canada. So Andrew, there you are, representing loud and proud. Canada. They only have one plane, by the way, as well. And if I failed to mention it, tan is the United Kingdom. Okay, and then there's pilots that are also in the game. And according to the Scenario 1 setup, I believe all the pilots are in the game already. Otherwise, you normally have to spend research points or resource points to get them. I know I read somewhere... Oh, where is it? Maybe I do have to spend resource points to get pilots. I will look that up. I don't know if the pilots start in the game or if they're just available to be recruited. Because normally it costs 2 resource points to get a pilot. So I'm going to, for now, just assume that they're available, but they're not like actually available to me until I pay these 2 resource points to get a pilot. And we'll talk about what a pilot does later. They're sort of weird, but I think they might be helpful. They're like a once per game kind of thing. You only get to use them once. So I was hoping that if I'm going to spend 2 resource points, I get to use it the rest of the game, but I don't. It's just a once per game thing. But we'll get into that. Okay, so then it lists cohesion values. WP stands for the Warsaw Pact, so that's our enemy. And then, of course, NATO is us. And then it has this thing called FIBA. I'll get to that in a second. And then it has all these numbers separated by slashes, and I'll show you what that means. The board itself has what's called Alpha Bravo, so it's A, B, C, D, E, F. It goes Alpha Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot. Okay, every one of these basically represents a thrust or maybe a spot on the war front. And these red tiles are the Warsaw Pact, the WP. And then blue is NATO. Those are our forces. So basically the front line right now is here. And this 3 represents the cohesion value or strength of the Warsaw Pact, the Russians. And in the 2, it represents the strength of the NATO unit. So right now, They definitely are stronger than we are. And if we get eliminated, then they move forward. And then, of course, if we eliminate them, we can push them back. The Warsaw Pact can never be pushed back any further than where you see them now. So they're going to permanently in the game always be here. But what we can do is we can reduce their strength. So this 3 could be reduced all the way down to a 1. And then, of course, that makes it more difficult for them to progress along the line. So what does the game want to do? The game wants to win battles and progress and get to the end of each line. So you can see some lines are only 3 deep, some are 4 deep, etc. Every line, of course, represents a city or location within Europe. Although this one doesn't say anything, it still represents some strategic place. And then at some spots, you'll see these numbers above them, like 1 or 3. What those are is those are victory points that the Russians will score. I guess I should start referring to them as Warsaw Pact. That the Warsaw Pact will score. So if they take this, they score a point. It's not about us scoring points, it's about them scoring points. And they have a point marker that you put at 0. And the way you win the game is you keep their score near 0. This is golf. We don't want to score points. If they do score points, and I think if they get up towards 20, they win. It's in the back. I didn't actually write that down because you know me. I never look at the objectives. But I do know that the more points they score, we lose. And there is a spot where if they score enough points, we end up going into nuclear war, which is a loss as well. So that's if they score enough points, like before the end of certain turns. But anyways, we'll get to that when we need to. Okay, so when you look at this, it says Alpha and Bravo 4. Then if you look here, you can see Alpha and Bravo are set at 4. So it's just a simple setup. You just follow the instructions. And then Charlie and Delta were at 5. So you can see that those were both set at 5. And it's whatever's facing up is the number that counts. So it's just a little dial. You just rotate it. It's pretty. It's not ingenious. I mean, you've seen them before, but it's very effective. Okay, so then the NATO ones, you can see, have these slashes, like 2/2/3/3, and sure enough, you'll see 2, 2, 3, 3, and that's it. It's just trying to tell you, and this is called a line. These ones in the back are safe. The only one that's currently in battle is the one up front. So bear that in mind. Now this CAS and FOFA, those are used for air missions, and we'll talk about those in a second. And they also do a real good job of describing all the different air missions and whatnot here. As far as everything else, everything starts at 0 except for the PGMs, which I think are the guided missiles, and we have 5. So at any point in the game, if we want to use one, we can, and it will effectively double the value of one of our planes. So you can see here, I have an air-to-air value of 2, I can make it a 4. So that's what the PGMs do for you, and so they're a limited resource. You can buy more, but they cost you RPs, which is resource points. Resource points, of course, are just a generic term for your overall money, economy, etc. It's basically your money in this game. And the dead track and the OCA track, this game has a lot of, what do you call them? Abbreviations, etc. And they confuse you at first, but in the end, it makes sense, and we'll get to it. And then you set up all the raid markers like this. This is basically how you assign your missions. We're going to take planes, and I'm going to say, okay, he's going to go on the primary mission, and this raid is going to, attack this line, and we're going to do a FOFA attack, or we're going to do a close air assault. So you just pick where you want your raid to go, and you put it on the board, and then these are the planes that we're assigning to the mission. So we're going to put him on air escort and him on ground combat duty, stuff like that. So that's what we're going to be doing in that regard. Then there's this thing called a decap strike. It is a specific raid. It's a special type of raid, and so that's the reason why it has the white marker. And then the OCA raid and the dead raids are also special types of raids. And so that's why they have their own thing, and they don't actually have a raid marker. They don't need one. Okay, so what else do we got from a component perspective? Obviously, we have all of our planes. You're going to have this located thing. And so what's going to happen is you're going to do reconnaissance missions. And these FOFA missions aren't allowed unless you succeed at a reconnaissance check. And once you do, you can put this down, which now is a reminder to let you know that you could do that type of mission when you go to your mission phase. So there's phases of the game, and you do reconnaissance first. And if you fail in your reconnaissance, then you're not allowed to do a FOFA type of mission. So that's what that is. This is a marker to just remind you that you put it in PGM on one of your planes. So you would put it with your plane to show that you've equipped a PGM. And then you flip it over. This is actually a hit marker. So when we do hits against the enemy, this is how we track how many hits we did to them. And if it was a FOFA hit, I would say I did 3 hits in FOFA, or I did 4 hits in CAS. And that's what you would do. You would just have these markers everywhere that you've done hits. And then there's 2 decks of cards. Shuffle them. The resolution cards, you need to draw them and put face down. Don't look at them. In Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc. Those are reinforcement cards. They're used at the end of the turn to do reinforcements for the Warsaw Pact. So that's it for setup. So the only thing we have is, do the pilots start in the game or not in the game? And I'm willing to bet they're not. So let me jump. All right, general setup. Yep, pilots go to the side of the board. They enter play later. So it flat out says that. So the pilots are not in the game. That makes total sense. It costs 2 resource points to hire a pilot. But now the pilots, they, as you can see, we have 2 American pilots, 2 UK pilots, and 1 German pilot. Apparently, none of the other countries have pilots. This game is a lot like Skies Above the Reich. You're going to draw a card, and there's going to be numbers on it. And those numbers are going to dictate whether you succeed or fail. And in some cases, higher numbers are bad. In other cases, lower numbers are bad. But what the pilots let you do is they let you draw 2 cards, and then you get to pick which one you want to use. So it increases your odds of getting a successful result. But once you use a pilot, it's out of the game forever. So they basically let you mitigate the card draw. And so you're not at the whim of the cards all the time. So I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's what the pilots do. And not having any at the start of the game, of course, is important, because now we may want to invest in pilots. So anyways, enough of that. And my apologies, the dog fur is underneath my plexiglass. So I'm trying, oh, there's one, I can move that one. But yeah, the other ones I can't get to. Okay, so let's get started. So that means I need to go to the next video. So I will stop, and we will see you on video 2. Stay awesome.